After years of silence, countless delays, and studio departures, Dying Light 2 Stay Human has finally arrived. The original Dying Light largely refined developer Techland's open-world zombie formula established in its Dead Island series by introducing a great new setting and parkour that was then expanded on by an incredible amount of both paid and free DLC updates. The first Dying Light grew to be such a mammoth product that before Dying Light 2's release, it was difficult to imagine how the studio could follow it up. Well, thankfully, Dying Light 2 has come out, and it solidifies the series as one of the greats amongst its horde of zombie-infested peers. Before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the game, we have to take a look at its technical performance. I got the chance to check out the Steam version of Dying Light 2 and ran it on a PC with a GeForce RTX 2090. Now that obviously isn't the most powerful card on the market at this point, but even then the game still ran pretty well. With this setup, I was able to run the game on high settings with some of its fancier bells and whistles like RTX turned off to maintain a stable 60 FPS. Although all the footage you'll see from early in the game in this video was capped at 30 FPS for the sake of capturing. At these settings, the game looked solid, with good detailing and view distance that could manage even its large horde encounters. The options menu is also solid, except for its curiously limited key mapping options. While the world of Dying Light 2 may look good, what really matters is just how good of a world it is beneath that. The story of the first Dying Light was arguably its weakest point. Filled with cliches and weak characters, it let down its strong voice acting by delivering a derivative story that could have been ripped from a handful of already established zombie properties. Dying Light 2 flips this on its head, making its narrative one of its greatest strengths. The game follows Aiden Caldwell, a pilgrim that travels through the post-apocalyptic wasteland between the remaining settlements of humanity to deliver supplies, news, and mail. Players are introduced to him as he arrives at one of the largest remaining pockets of humans in Europe, simply known as the City. There, you'll quickly get in the middle of various conflicts between its three main factions: the Peacekeepers, the Renegades, and the Survivors. The three factions are constantly at odds with each other, but you get choices throughout the game to support either the Peacekeepers or the Survivors at multiple intersections. The Renegades are just an overarching antagonist faction, but as you reach districts of the city and see that region's unique conflicts and turmoil, you will have to make decisions of who to support and what results to work towards. This is nothing new for video games, especially not open world ones, but Dying Light 2 is so well written that it transcends to becoming exceptional. It does this in two ways. First is its characters. As you play through the game, you'll come across a wide cast of characters, and nearly every single one has fully articulated motivations for their actions that are completely understandable, accompanied by derivative flaws. The Peacekeepers are generally militaristic assholes that can rule too harshly, but they also aren't wrong that the Survivors are not very well organized. That faction has a lot of defective actors who impulsively do devastating things for the entire city in pursuit of their own selfish goals. In this way, Dying Light 2 manages to accomplish what many games with decisions as a core mechanic fail to. It makes each decision complicated enough that it isn't as simple as deciding to do a good or evil playthrough. Instead of choosing between binary morality, you're grappling with philosophies being put to the test by the complete collapse of human civilization. Secondly, the game's narrative is propped up by the weight of the consequences of these actions. Decisions can have the expected impact of seeing one faction gain more power over the others, but there is also a lot more here. Entire quests will go unseen, landmarks untouched, and characters ignored depending on how you approach the main quest line. And the side quests also feature impactful decisions that can catch you off guard. There is one side quest in particular that really stayed with me, but there is a trigger warning before I get into it because the side quest does include a suicide, so if you want to skip forward to the next section, then you won't hear anything about it. I'm also going to try and stay as spoiler-free as possible here, but the broad strokes are that I finished a side quest that led to a reveal that one small character's brother was a really bad dude. Like, had been lying to his younger brother to get him to lead people to their deaths so that they could rob them bad. So I had the option of telling him the truth or lying, and I went with the truth so that he could know what his brother was actually like. When I returned to find them at their camp later, I arrived just as they were preparing to jump from the top of a church tower. I climbed up there as quickly as I could and got one dialogue choice to talk him down, and I picked wrong. In an instant, the consequences of my actions were thrown in my face regardless of my previous intentions. Dying Light 2's world is filled with humans struggling to be optimistic and fighting to make the best of things. But that doesn't hide the horrible underbelly of what a world state like this would do to people. And when it hits you, it goes straight for your gut. But now that serious stuff is out of the way, Let's take a look at the more lighthearted combat mechanics. Combat in Dying Light 2 is simply badass. It's brutal, frenetic, kinetic, and expressive while managing to still feel claustrophobic. At any time, you have 4 weapons equipped that are cobbled together from everyday items like shovels, street signs, and whatever else you can get your hands on. These fall into either one-handed or two-handed categories. Guns have become largely useless in this setting from the lack of ammunition being manufactured over the past 20 years. So for range options, you'll mostly only have bows and arrows. There are guns that you can find or craft, but they come with only 1 or 2 uses before completely shattering, making them mostly used for getting out of a sticky situation or staggering a really large boss. Combat here also feels completely different depending on what weapons you use and what enemies you're facing. Zombies are a positioning-focused affair regarding never staying still long enough to get surrounded while picking off the ones that you can, while fighting humans focuses on parrying, dodging, and using them as tools against one another. Getting used to exactly what the game is looking for from you can definitely take some time. But when it clicks, it is a great time, filled with satisfying gore effects, real weight behind your swings, and enough energy to keep things fresh throughout the entire game. Aiden's parkour skills also come into play in combat, especially when fighting humans. A successful parry staggers an enemy, allowing you to vault off their back and dropkick another enemy in a move that you'll never get tired of pulling off. That dropkick also returns, as it was in the first game, and it is still just as fun to launch enemies off of a rooftop as long as you don't get your positioning just a bit off. Combat is also augmented by crafting different weapon attachments. These have a variety of effects, from shooting fireballs to arcing lightning between nearby enemies. Using them is a ton of fun, especially when you start upgrading them later in the game. However, the effects can at times block the screen so much that it gets hard to see what the hell is actually going on. Apart from combat, the majority of your time in Dying Light 2 will be spent running across the city's rooftops through its parkour mechanics. Fans of the first game will immediately notice that the physics of the free running have been heavily adjusted in the sequel, making it feel a bit more floaty. This does take some getting used to, but it allows you to adjust your movements and make a plan on the fly, allowing you to save yourself from a risky jump that didn't pay off at the last moment, or string together a complicated series of jumps, clambers, swings, and rolls. There are a ton of moves and options that you will come across to get around the city, from wall running and sliding to zip lines and jumping off the heads of zombies for a big boost. The majority of these moves are unlocked through the game's RPG mechanics, but the map is very well built to allow you to take advantage of these moves when you have them, without making you feel punished if you don't. The different zones of the city also do a fantastic job of mixing up how you must approach traversal. One has you bouncing from the street to the rooftops constantly, while another has you gliding among skyscrapers, and yet another has you madly swinging with a grappling hook. The variety does wonders to keep the game feeling free, while also giving each section of the city its own personality. That, and I don't think anyone will ever complain about a game getting a grappling hook. Parkour also ends up playing a large role in the game's puzzles. Whether it's climbing a windmill to repair it, completing parkour time trials, or carrying wires around an old electrical station to get it up and running again. The puzzles are generally well thought out, but it can get a bit annoying when you find ones that you simply don't have enough stamina for and have to come back to in the future. Like everything in Dying Light 2, those RPG mechanics come in a few different forms. First, there are inhibitors that you can find scattered across the map. For every 3 that you find, you can level up either your health or your stamina. Doing so obviously makes the bar bigger, but it also unlocks more options on each stat's associated skill trees. These skills include new parkour moves, combat mechanics like slowing down time or doing power attacks, and there's some great variety while all of it feels brilliantly cohesive once it's all unlocked. Skills from those trees are unlocked by earning combat and parkour XP for completing associated actions, quests, or surviving at night. Night looks a little bit different from the previous game, which is honestly a tad disappointing. If you survive a night, you'll be rewarded with extra combat and parkour XP, but it is far from being as frightening and intense as the first Dying Light, and you'll mostly venture out just to scavenge a few marked buildings that have a lot of resources in them, while the zombies that would normally be inside during the day are out loitering in the street. During the night, you also have to manage your exposure to the infection, as you have a meter that will be constantly drained and you'll die if it hits 0. You can manage it either by taking a break in the safety of a UV light, crushing some glowing blue mushrooms, or taking a hit from an inhaler. The mechanic is pretty cool at first, but it quickly becomes kind of annoying, and then you just level up so high that it becomes completely negligible anyways. The second RPG system comes in the form of Aiden's clothing. You have slots to fill with gear you find scattered throughout the city or purchase from merchants. Every piece comes with an armor rating and is labeled with a build type such as tank, medic, or archer. temperature. These types dictate what other bonuses that gear will give you, whether it's less stamina consumed with two-handed attacks, better healing with items, or increased XP when using a bow. These stat increases are a fun way to specialize your character, but don't go in expecting the likes of Borderlands or Destiny here. You'll get a fair amount of gear, but not enough to go grinding for god rolls, and having a well-balanced build is only really necessary at the very last stages of a playthrough. Aiden also has an overall character. This levels up very slowly, but allows more powerful gear and weapons to appear in loot throughout the world, as well as making you strong enough to tackle more dangerous sections of the city. While this level serves a utility purpose in players getting more powerful throughout their playthrough, it doesn't end up having any effect on gameplay, other than just making sure that your hits deal enough damage to kill enemies of the same level, which does make it feel pretty arbitrary. Finally, as you work to restore parts of the city, you can assign facilities to be controlled either by the Peacekeepers or the Survivor. Giving a facility to either faction increases their overall control of the entire city, while also upgrading their controlled regions with installments to help you out. Each faction has a linear progression you can unlock, with the Peacekeepers focusing on building things that help you deal with the infected, like explosive cars. The Survivors, on the other hand, focus on keeping you moving and making traversal a bit easy. These upgrades include winches that zip you up or down a building, and even punching bags that you can tackle off the top of a rooftop to fall down quickly and safely. The system is great at tying your decisions of which faction to support with how you experience the city itself. You may really agree with the Peacekeepers in one area, but is giving them the energy plant worth it if you don't really care about their next upgrade? However, the linear progression of the system can bog it down slightly, as it often dissuades you from investing towards a cool upgrade because you don't want to waste facilities getting the 2 or 3 less interesting ones required to get there. I really don't think that I can recommend Dying Light 2 Stay Human enough. As the first big AAA release of 2022, the year is already off to a strong start, as Dying Light 2 is the whole package. If you want an emotionally engaging narrative with characters you'll grow to feel for and care about, it's here. If you want fun combat with great melee weapon feedback and plenty of options, it's here. If you want a big world to explore with your friends, it's here. If you want to race around that world and explore every urban nook and cranny, it's here. It ticks all of the boxes, and I personally can't wait to see where Techland goes with it into the future, especially after what they accomplished with the first game. Thanks for watching But Why Those first video review. If you have any thoughts or opinions on Dying Light 2 yourself, we'd love to hear them, so please leave a comment below. If you want to see more, this channel is going to start being a bit more active, so make sure to subscribe.